Thank you, Maddie, and welcome everyone to Johnson Consulting Conversations. I'm honored to have with us today Dr. Jason Troyer, a visionary in transforming how we think about cemeteries and grief support. Dr. Troyer has developed something truly revolutionary, the Healing Path Cemetery, which reimagines traditional cemeteries as active community healing destinations by combining interactive technology, evidence-based grief support resources, and meaningful ritual experiences. He's helping families navigate loss in a very profound new way while simultaneously helping cemetery operators bring and build together stronger community connections. I've had the opportunity to visit the original Healing Path Cemetery system in Maryville, Tennessee, and I look forward to this conversation. Welcome, Dr. Jason Troyer.
Thanks so much for having me, Lacey. I really appreciate being here.
Well, I'm excited that we're going to explore how compassion and innovation can work together to serve grieving families, and of course, the psychological benefits of your interactive cemetery experiences. And I'm here to help people understand those practical strategies that you have for them that they can consider as we start to look ahead to 2026. And I want to start at the beginning of this journey. What inspired you to expand beyond traditional grief counseling into developing technology-based cemetery solutions?
Yeah, great question. And it's certainly nothing against traditional grief counseling. I've been a traditional grief counselor. I've done grief groups and all sorts of things like that. But what I keep finding is that sometimes, and therapists and professors can be guilty of this. We really stay too far in the weeds in the theory, and especially for grief, when we're in a situation where we feel like we're not quite sure what to do, we feel like our world has stopped, but nobody understands. So often we want something practical and active that we can do, and so. When you combine that with, I've just had a lifelong love with cemeteries. I have found them to be places of comfort, even if I don't have a loved one there. I remember, driving out to a local cemetery when I was in grad school, almost a weekly basis as a kind of way to recharge. And there's nothing like a cemetery to kind of really help you get your brain around the big picture and really keep things in perspective. So combining those two things together, the healing path and some other strategies, being more active, things that we can do and helping people do those sorts of things was just kind of a natural growth out of those two interests.
That's a fascinating origin story. And on behalf of Johnson Consulting Group, we certainly appreciate you staying true to the foundation, but looking ahead as to how you can help meet families with their grief journey and giving them alternatives in feeling that compassion and the support. And it sounds like this vision really does require bringing together different areas of expertise. Tell us about your partnership with Dr. Lynn Gibson. How did that come about, and what unique perspectives did you each bring to the project?
Yeah, well, you ask about my good friend, Dr. Gibson, and I could go on and on about that. So I'll try to keep this brief. I was a professor for 14 years. Grief and loss has always been my area of research. I happened to be at a college within a mile or two of this funeral home, and by happenstance, we got together and had lunch. It's probably been 15 years now. And I just started helping with, again, practical things around the funeral home and the cemetery that they owned. And then around, I'm going to say 2018, 2019, at Grandview Cemetery, at their cemetery, they realized that they needed more cremation options. And so that's when they decided to put in this thing that they call the Legacy Trail. And I've always had this idea of putting in grief stations at a cemetery. And sometimes I use the comparison for if you go to a nice greenway in a city and they have these exercise stations, the same concept where you have a sign and a place where you can do something, but a focus on grief instead of on physical wellness. And so Dr. Gibson, as you might be able to tell even from his title, is even what, 2 PhDs, 3 master's degrees. I've lost count at this point, but Lynn is just a really unique individual who's always looking for the next thing. And Lynn was open to And it was truly a collaboration where we put our brains together to think about how can we make things be really active and engaging at the cemetery with a goal of bringing people physically back to the cemetery and reminding them what a special healing place the cemetery is. And so Lynn brings a lot, certainly his expertise in funeral and cemetery service. Lynn has a great deal of training with a theology background as well, and also with that some strong grief perspectives and education. And so it's just an opportunity to play ideas off of each other. And Lynn was just an invaluable collaborator on this.
It's clear that collaboration was essential in developing this comprehensive approach. And I've had the opportunity to collaborate with Dr. Lynn Gibson in the past. And it's always fun and energizing to hear the ideas and the vision that he has. And I understand that part of your mission involves reconnecting people with something we've lost as a society. And I know you've mentioned in talking about this that society has forgotten about those cemetery benefits. What specifically have we lost touch with?
Yeah, I think the main thing that we've lost touch with is remembering how unique of a space the cemetery is. And there is a power of place, and you could use the example. Let's say you wanted to meet um, a well-known interior designer or a wedding consultant, and you called them up and they said, "Yeah, let's have a meeting. Let's meet at McDonald's." That's not what you do. There's certain places that we do things, and there's certain places that hold certain power. And so I like to say, cemeteries take our grief seriously. It is a place where that really kind of truly allows us to disconnect from all of the distractions, including these wonderful, terrible things that we all have in our pockets, and an opportunity to kind of really take a moment, pause, consider, think, ponder, feel, all those things, and just remembering what it is to kind of do that. And I think, unfortunately, through several factors, we're a highly mobile society. We are increasingly moving away from faith communities with the rise of the nuns, the unaffiliated religious folks, and other factors all play into this idea where we're moving up. When we give up some of those traditions, it's kind of like, what do I do? And I think, unfortunately, the cemetery has been lost in all of that for a lot of folks. And so simply reminding them there's a lot that they can do individually at the cemetery as a way as part of their healing journey.
That is such an important observation on how our relationships with these sacred places has changed over the years. And your work seems to be about reclaiming that connection. How do you define the difference between a traditional cemetery visit and a healing destination?
Yeah. And I think what I would like to say that first of all, my biggest concern is the non-cemetery visits. That's the folks who, for one reason or another, don't have a place to go to or don't feel welcome there, or those things. Those are the ones that concern me the most. What I would love to see in every cemetery visit is the opportunity for them to create private ritual with themselves. Now, I am a big fan of a well done funeral, and whatever you want to call it, and whatever works for that family, I'm probably okay with, as long as it's tailored to them and it's well thought out and there's been a lot of communication. But that group ritual is just kind of the first step. Anyone who's had a significant loss understands that there are just these countless private moments that sometimes we share with other people or sometimes we never share with other people. And that is the long-term work or the long-term journey of grief. And so I think a lot of those can happen and maybe be more productive when they happen at the cemetery. Not that everything has to be at the cemetery, of course, but the cemetery, like I keep saying, is unique in its kind of a power of place and what we can feel comfortable doing there, what we feel like we have permission to do there, those sorts of things.
I love that distinction, and I appreciate the phrasing of having those private moments. It really reframes the purpose and the potential of these spaces. And I want to dive into the specifics of how you've built this system. Can you walk us through the three core components of the Healing Path system and how they work together?
Yeah, thanks. So the first part of the system is helping the cemetery themselves create stations. And in some ways, this is a replacement from the traditional model of cemeteries. Who a lot of cemeteries will have various features. There might be statues, they might be marble, concrete structures, things like that. That maybe decades ago were designed to kind of anchor a certain section in the cemetery, those sorts of things. Um, let's be honest, in a lot of cemeteries, those have kind of crumbled over the years and maybe haven't been kept up as well. And they're also maybe not drawing people in. They may not have the same connection to our society today. And so what we do is we help the cemetery create the stations. And for us, for a healing path station is usually at minimum a bench and a sign. Um, in a couple of cases, it might be a kiosk or something where there might be information or resources or something for them to physically do. But we help them decide on which stations might be useful for them. And we help them think about what would be useful in their specific situation. A common example is you might have new features, perhaps a new columbarium or a new mausoleum chapel or something like that that you would love to have more and more folks know about, walk by, those sorts of things. And so it just makes good strategic sense to kind of put your healing path stations near some of their features they'd like the community to know about. So we have the stations, and they can choose as many stations up to 9 different options that we can help them with. Some are looking only at one, some are looking at a variety of different options, those sorts of things. So that's kind of the physical presence at the cemetery. The second component of the Healing Path system would be the app. And so the app is it does a lot of work in the system. It is customized to the cemetery. It includes grief support and healing rituals as specific activities within the app, as well as a showcase for the cemetery's features and products, and as well as a connection to things like flower sales, online planning, and ways to connect with the cemetery staff, those sorts of things. So the app is a way that people, whether they're on campus, on site for the cemetery, or at home, they can take place into these various healing rituals. And then the third component would be the social media component. And this is an opportunity to help get the word out, to share. You've got people who love your cemetery that live 300 miles away. And so even though they might consider your cemetery to be their home cemetery, they might be a state or two away. And we want them to feel connected emotionally so they can still use those rituals and resources, even though they're not physically stepping foot. Uh, Maybe they've already purchased property at that cemetery. Maybe they're planning to. They just feel a connection to the family there, whatever it might be. So we've got the on-site stations, the app, and then the social media piece.
I want to dive in a little bit deeper with the interactive app. How is that different from other grief support technologies that are currently available? I know you've touched on a few things, but let's take that apart and talk about how different it is.
Yeah, I think the app is unique in my mind because it really combines a variety of different multiple healing activities within one app. Uh, some of it is just short informational videos, but most of it is designed to allow the individual to process something. That might be something related to remembrance. That might be something physically active. Um, that might be hearing inspiration, various things like that. And so I think that's what really makes it unique. And the other part of it is that everything is designed from the perspective of cemeteries as a healing space.
Mm.
And so while there might be other resources out there that are more individual, they're probably not created from the perspective of a cemetery professional and that sort of viewpoint.
I like those differentiators. Now let's talk about the physical experience that visitors will have on site. How do the physical healing stations create a meaningful experience for guests and visitors?
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, it is relatively simple, but it basically a lot of the things with the Healing Path system are helping folks kind of really engage with the cemetery, and making it easy and straightforward and comfortable for them to do that. So I'm looking out my window here at my house. I mentioned before we started recording, I actually share a property with a cemetery, and I drive by the cemetery all the time. And there is a gentleman who I can only imagine is an older widower who brings his chair, I suspect, to his wife's grave, and I see him sitting there. And so these opportunities. He's already he feels confident enough to just go ahead and do that. Not everyone does. So the stations are designed by giving them a place to sit and saying, look, the cemetery is it is completely acceptable and normal to come back here, to sit, to be present, to do the things you need to do. That might be saying things that need to be said. That might mean writing things while you're here, processing, just feeling, or zoning out, whatever that might be. And so the physical stations are, and then in some cases, the stations are designed to, well, if you feel so called, then here's one thing you can do to process one part of your grief journey. Whatever that station is designed to do specifically. So it invites them to physically come back. I think that is such a key part. I think I worry that our cemeteries aren't being visited enough, and that if we continue to see fewer and fewer people visit the cemeteries, we're in big trouble. So it's designed to physically remind them that this is a special place, and we welcome you to come and be here.
I like the intentionality behind each station. It's remarkable. I'm curious about the specific activities that you have incorporated. What are the nine specific healing activities offered at the stations, and how are they selected?
Yeah, we'll start with how they were selected first. It really is a combination of just over my career and my training as a former therapist, and also always on the lookout for what we could turn into an activity that might be done as part of a grief support book. It might be typically done in the therapist's office. It might be something that people just tend to do on their own, bringing that together. So some of the more common ones may not have time to go all through nine of them here, but some of the more common ones, almost every grief therapist uses the write a letter.
Mm.
Unfortunately, in loss, we are unfortunately, physically cut off from our loved ones. We may have had things we wish we could have said. New things happen to us that we want to share to them. We might want to offer forgiveness, ask for forgiveness, all sorts of things that feel just really cut off as part of loss. And that's one of the most painful things about loss. And so a lot of the rituals allow us symbolically to do something that feels like we wouldn't normally otherwise be able to do it. So in that letter, we can offer forgiveness, update them, ask for forgiveness, those sorts of things. And so we have a letter writing station where they can physically write a letter and actually mail the letter, so to speak, at the cemetery. We want to carry it all the way through the process. And in therapy, we call this the gestalt, the kind of following all the way through, which is a natural antidote to being so cut off and stifled as part of grief and loss. Um, a couple of the other ones we have include something called the remembrance board, where we can allow people to kind of see a list of descriptors and they choose the ones that they want to apply to their loved one, and it just sparks stories. All the adjectives about the individual are designed to spark memories, and the ideal scenario is to maybe even do that with somebody else. Maybe you have a child or a grandchild with you and you want to share some stories about your loved one who's passed away, those sorts of things. Um, so those are a couple of the examples of the different types of activities that they can do at the stations. And so the stations then do, yeah, mirror the app in terms of the rituals that they participate in with the app.
I like how each station serves the distinct purpose in the healing journey. Now, beyond the app and the physical stations, there's also the digital community component. What role does social media content play in the overall approach to community engagement?
Yeah, I think it serves a couple of roles, both for the community and then also for the cemetery professionals. One, for the cemetery professionals, I think it serves this really important role of meeting people where they are in and gives them something to talk about other than it is important to talk about cemetery options. It's important to talk about pricing and those sorts of things. I don't mean to poo-poo that at all, but talking about people's grief journey is something that's going to connect with them on a very long-term basis. And so this gives them a way to create that connection, introduce members of the professional staff, those sorts of things. And then for the community, certainly it creates a couple of things. One thing that it does is that it reminds them that this is all normal. It's always amazing for something that happens to virtually all of us experiencing a loss, that as a society we do it so badly. We tend to have so many myths and misconceptions about things, and we feel so alone, despite the fact that happens, such a universal experience. And so the social media content just reminds people it's normal to be feeling what you're feeling. Here's some ways, if you feel like it's a good match for you in your personal grief journey. Here's some things you can do if you feel stuck, those sorts of things. And you start to feel not quite so alone. And I think that obviously is a really important part. And people always remember where that information is coming from. They know who kind of introduced them to that. So the cemetery gets credit for that.
And it's important for cemetery operators to know that the digital presence extends the cemetery's reach far beyond
Yes.
the physical boundaries. And I want to step back now and explore the evidence-based supporting this work. What does research tell us about the psychological benefits of ritual and ceremony in processing the emotions of grief?
Yeah, and it comes back to a couple of things I briefly mentioned before, but for grief, rituals almost everything. And symbolic action is so important because we have this opportunity where it feels like we're artificially cut off from our loved one. And we see that in a lot of our grief reactions. We expect our loved one to walk through the door. Our phone rings and we expect it to be them. It just feels, unfortunately, like such a terrible, like a ripping of paper or just this absence of them in our lives. And so the ritual allows us to symbolically do what we wish we could have done while they were alive. And so that is often what we see in therapy, and that's what we wanted to kind of mirror in the healing path system. And so it's just really critical, the opportunities to do that, and also the opportunity for them to not feel quite so alone. Even though a lot of these rituals might be things that they do on their own, they know that they're not the only one doing it. They go to the healing path, they see other people sitting at the station, they see people posting their own experiences from the app or at your cemetery, and just kind of reminds them, I'm not alone in this. Even though I may not want to join a grief group, I may not want to show up a big event, but I feel a kinship with these folks who are going through something similar.
And the science clearly supports what many cultures have known intuitively for centuries. And in today's digital age, you're clearly incorporating the virtual elements. And I want to know, in your opinion, how do the virtual ritual, how does that complement traditional memorial practices rather than replace them?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, they really do work side by side. And in many ways, whether or not you are writing a letter longhand while you're sitting at a station or sitting at home, or you're typing it into the app into the Letters to Heaven feature, um, we feel the same things. We might expect that it might be very different. And in some ways, we don't use AI within the app specifically, but what we've seen is that AI is a good example, is that we can almost have these conversations that feel very real. The emotions can feel very similar in those sorts of ways. So whether it is a digital experience or an in-person experience, I think the important thing is to give people the option to have those experiences. The nice thing about the app is if you've got individuals who are 300 miles away, have mobility issues or other challenges where they just simply can't get to the cemetery, it gives them the same opportunities to do those things. And maybe they feel really, it's been a recent loss, a very traumatic loss. Um, they might feel really vulnerable and just not want to leave their safe space. And so the app allows them to kind of do all those same things at home. And it really has much of the same power as before.
And the interactive app really helps to strike that balance between honoring tradition and embracing new possibilities. And it's incredibly important. And speaking of honoring traditions, grief is so deeply personal and culturally specific. How do you balance providing grief support with respecting different cultures and different religions and their approaches to mourning?
Yeah, and what we've done is largely focused on the underlying things that would be fairly universal across different faith communities and individual cultures. But you're right; it's absolutely really important to be respectful of those different traditions. Almost without exception, most of the focus is on an interpersonal level, and it doesn't necessarily take a specific it doesn't flow from a specific religious tradition and those sorts of things. We do have, as an option in the app, we do have a Pray the Rosary app. Of course, that is a very specific tradition in one way. All the features in the app are optional. We can turn those on and off for various cemeteries to kind of fit their community the best. But really the focus is on the underlying, assuming that the cultural tradition is important to remember our loved ones, it's important to kind of process our grief and walk our journey, then we really wanted to design it so that it would really be as inclusive as possible with a wide range of traditions. And then they can also add their own unique flair. Well, for example, the app includes the opportunity to take a picture, and what we designed that for is like if they want to on a maybe it is Day of the Dead, and you're taking pictures at your loved one's gravesite and sharing those on social media, and you're adding your sticker or your banner to the bottom. You get to choose what you take your picture of, and what cultural aspects go with that. But it would work with virtually any faith tradition or cultural group.
I want to shift our focus to talking about reaching those individuals who are not participating in cemetery visits, but would benefit from these resources. How do you reach those families who may not naturally think to visit a cemetery for support?
Yeah, and I think the great thing about the system is that it really does reach out to people. There are people who are, I'm comfortable going to a cemetery and I want to be there. And so the stations work well in that situation. The app works well if for folks who don't want to leave the home. They're again want to have a very private experience, a very controlled experience. They're very, most of us are pretty comfortable doing various things on our phone, and so it's designed to be really as simple and easy to kind of figure out as possible. Pretty intuitive, and so the other thing I would say is that the grief support videos can be kind of an alternative to a grief group. I love grief groups. They can be an incredibly powerful experience for the people who feel comfortable going there. But I also know there's a lot of people, and a lot of them are men, who are not going to be comfortable saying, I'm just going to go into a room and sit in a circle and talk about my feelings. It's just not what their comfort zone. But I do have some questions, or I do want to feel connected in another way. And so that way being more of somebody who's watching a video or getting resources a different way can be really helpful. So we're trying to kind of spread out the opportunities to reach people wherever they are and whatever they're comfortable with.
And reaching those people, changing the perceptions is all crucial, and having the right outreach strategy for that. I want to talk about practicality for cemetery operators who may be interested in this approach. What does the implementation process look like for cemeteries interested in adopting this system?
Yeah, we've come up with just about a 3 or 4 page handout that walks folks through that, but and we it really is a step-by-step process. Usually what we start with is the app, and we're always happy to one policy that we have is we're happy to create the app for anybody who wants to see what it would look like for their cemetery. So they can do that without any obligation. It's completely free, and no assumptions that they would necessarily use the program. If they just want to see what it would look like and pass it around the office, we're happy to do that. So that's usually where we start, and it gets their brain thinking about how they can use it. We also walk through them, give them an idea of like, here's a description of all the possible stations you could have. Which one, do you have any questions about these? What are some of the goals that you're looking for? Um, Physically, what does your cemetery look like? Are you trying to get people to talk in a certain place? Is this new? Or are we implementing it along current paths or roads that you already have? Talking about that. The third step is usually talking about signage is important. They have the opportunity either for them to use some kind of pre-designed signs that are customized to their cemetery, or sometimes every cemetery has signs already, so you may have your sign guy or gal in your local community that you'd rather use, and we're happy to work with cemeteries to do that. But we and then so with all those things in place, we really have the 3 steps, a little discussion about what they want social media to look like. But it starts with that kind of that free trial with the app, just to kind of see what it looks like. And often that really gets the brain going into thinking about how they can use it and how they can use it for outreach in the community too.
So let's say they love the free trial app and they're ready to customize the app and the content. How exactly are you doing that for different cemetery sizes and community demographics?
Yeah, one, we just try to provide as much flexibility as possible. And part of that is, you know, I can see an example of a cemetery only having like 1 or 2 stations. They might be smaller. They might want to test it out in one way or another. We've got other folks who really want to create this more of a walking trail sort of a thing. And so they might be looking at most of the available stations as a possibility. That's one thing. Another way that we want to customize is that a lot of the content within the app is customizable. For example, we have a feature in the app called Hear a Blessing, and it is a variety of different religious and secular prayers and blessings that you're hearing. Um, I happen to have a family uh, connection to a wonderful narrator, and Bill Curtis is, you may know him from Cold Case Files back in the day, but also he's on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me on NPR. He's a former CBS morning host, and he happens to be my mother-in-law's first cousin, and he's got this Peabody Award-winning narrator voice, and so he did all the prayers for it. So it's great already. But what we've seen is we've had clients who are excited about they have a good relationship with a lot of clergy and faith community leaders in the area. So they could actually go and get just a recording of them, each person in their community saying a prayer, and we'll put that in the app for them. So now it is customized to faith leaders in their community, and they're hearing their own folks from their community, and other sorts of things like that. So it really is, if they we want to make it simple. If like I don't have a lot of time for this, I kind of want to use it out of the box, let's go with it. Or I really want to use this as an opportunity to start more and more conversations with community partners and make this really feel local, we can do that as well.
I really like the customization efforts that you're making to make sure that it's relevant and that it's effective. And of course, technology is only as good as the people who support it. What
Yeah.
training and support do you provide to cemetery staff to make sure that the system is used effectively?
Yeah, it is designed to try to be as simple as possible. We understand and appreciate that cemetery professionals have their own original roles and all the thing and their long to-do lists. And so we don't want them to have a lot to do. I do encourage folks to look into, just simply use the app quite a bit,
Mm.
mostly so that they can see and recommend it when they come across a family that needs it. So if they're going through the process of creating a memorial or a monument, and they're hearing certain things, it's like, by the way, we have this free resource and it has free grief videos in it. We've got, for our clients, we've got bookmarks with QR codes that take them straight to the app, in various ways that families can easily get to the app. The other thing that's built into the app is a very easy way to share it. So we encourage every staff member to at least have it on their phone. If they're walking across the grounds, come across, for example, the widower that I was talking about earlier, maybe it's the first time seeing him there, you can just say, you know, you've got the QR code on your phone that can instantly share your cemetery's app with them if anyone else has their cell phone right there. Um, and I should be clear, we talk about it as an app. It is a progressive web app, which is what all the major corporations are moving to. This is something that works instantly on any device connected to the internet. So tablets, desktops, folks, it looks best on the phone. It's designed primarily for the phone, but they're not going out to the app store. It's something that's working immediately without going out, and there's no code or anything like that. It's going to work instantly, and they have the option to download it.
I like the suggested dialogue examples that you just gave, and I want to dive deeper into that human element with the system. What role do you envision cemetery staff having in order to build further relationships through the system?
Yeah, and I love the way you phrase that question, because I really think this is mostly about building relationships. This is not designed to replace the human to human contact, the opportunity to kind of build up the cemetery professional as an expert and as a resource for questions. It's designed to really enhance that. And it's just a way to have a really good tool in their tool belt as an opportunity for them to increase those relationships. No big surprise, the grief educator is a big fan of giving away grief information. And I always say, I'm not trying to turn you into grief therapist. You probably don't have time for that. Um, and in those situations, but some timely resources at that point of contact. Yeah, we can Google everything, but as you hear somebody share a story or say something, if you're the person who can offer a resource or learning about something, folks remember that when they're kind of feeling in that crisis mode or really feeling down and out. The person who comes in with a resource is somebody who really stands out and builds trust immediately in those situations. So that's the main thing that I see. And again, it is important to stay on top of what products and features families want these days to be mindful about pricing and those sorts of economic and sales factors. Those are important things, but this is really about the why we use cemeteries. And if we want to translate that to a sales perspective, that's about the top of the funnel. Like we've got to keep the top of the funnel pretty wide open. I'm afraid more and more as folks have other options other than cemeteries, including taking the urn home, that top of that funnel is shrinking quite a bit. And so this is an opportunity to kind of make sure that stays nice and wide and gives a lot of opportunities for people to and also get on the grounds and just meet people and learn their name, so to speak, and let that trusting relationship develop.
I've always believed that cemetery personnel, they have the opportunity to be trusted guides in the healing journey for families. Now, I do want to address something that people may feel a little bit uncomfortable about, but that is an important reality for cemetery operations. How does providing grief support naturally lead to conversations about permanent placement options?
Yeah, and I think those conversations can go hand in hand. Certainly we want to pick and choose our moments when we want to discuss those things. What we have built straight into the app is um, it can go by different names based on what the cemetery wants to call it, but generally we call it cemetery options. So there's a showcase of your options right in the app as one of right next to the grief support button. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to have that there. That is, that is answering questions, that is solving a problem that the family has in terms of what do we want permanent placement to look like, and what are my options based on disposition. And so I think it's perfectly reasonable to have those right in there. It gives the cemetery a chance to really, I call it the cemetery showcase right there. Right below every picture or video, it can be picture or video. Right below it is an opportunity to contact the cemetery about more information about that, and so that can lead into whatever lead generation system that they've already got set up, or an opportunity to call or emails is all built into the app in that way. We recognize that. Cemeteries have to be successful. They're based on a certain financial model, and they've got to be able to provide those solutions for those families. And so that's a natural thing that we wanted to include in the app right there.
I think that's a really thoughtful perspective of how service naturally creates those opportunities. And the key is authenticity. I want to talk about specific strategies that help cemetery operators showcase their features without appearing to be sales focused.
Yeah, and I think that the main thing is that it's built into there, and I think it normalizes having discussions about that. And I think the main thing is that it creates an opportunity where that's not the only thing we're talking about. So when we look at the social media piece and the cemetery can choose to share certain things, or they can have us share certain things for them. And as we have the opportunity to share videos from the app. We talk about the features of the app in the social media pieces and those sorts of things. And we can sprinkle in discussion about, just educating them about, what are their options for urns, for example, and just, if they're thinking their mindset is 20 years ago, and all they're thinking is, the burial of caskets or a mausoleum crypt, and they don't know about new options. And the cemetery may have, just received those, or created or built those options in the last couple of years. It's just an opportunity to sprinkle those in. But it's not the only thing that the cemetery is talking about. And so we're talking about your grief journey, but we're also kind of talking about that, and in kind of an appropriate ratio, so to speak, where it's in that kind of. I do worry that I look at a lot of cemetery social media sites, and you want to take a look there, and if every post is about pricing and a specific option without connecting with them on any other level, how long are they going to hang around? This gives you a lot of other important things to talk about that you can connect with, and also sprinkle those things in as well.
I think your mission is all about leading with value and relationship building, and that's the difference maker with your healing path system. And I want to talk about measuring success, both in terms of community impact and business outcomes. How do you do that?
Yeah, a couple of things that we would want to see. One, we would want to see certainly an increased over time. Sometimes it takes a while to kind of to work with the algorithm, so to speak, but we want to see an increased social media presence and increased engagement on social media. That's tougher and tougher to do these days. There's a lot of social media channels, a lot of competition on social media, but we want to see at least some of that. We also want to see increased personal visits. We actually want to see foot traffic at the cemetery. That's one way that we know that it's happening. And the types of foot traffic. One thing that we're seeing, and certainly I have the most experience with the what we call the original healing path. We've got a lot of local therapists who take individual grieving clients there or ask them to go between sessions and come, and then they come back and process what they went through with the therapist. We've got hospice groups coming out there, those sorts of things. Um, and certainly, eventually, we want to see increased sales. Now, given the nature of cemetery work, that may not always happen right away, but certainly, eventually that's in some ways kind of the bottom line of financial viability there. So we certainly want to see that as well.
And we know that change always meets resistance, particularly in traditional industries. What resistance have you encountered from traditional cemetery operators, and how do you address it?
Well, the healing path system is brand new in terms of kind of bringing it to other cemeteries, and so thankfully we haven't met with much resistance. Mostly, we're finding just kind of lack of awareness, and so again, really appreciate the opportunity to share it here with Johnson Consulting's, with this program. Um, Thankfully, I think cemeterians are hungry for some new options. I think there's a lot of cemeteries that do have a longer term focus and recognize, and they see the funnel shrinking in some ways, and they want to, they're not quite sure what to do. And there are lots of things, lots of options. And I just hope that folks look at the healing path system as one other option that they might have to as a way to kind of increase awareness for cemeteries and re-educate the community and build relationships.
Now, another concern that people might have is privacy. How do you handle privacy concerns when dealing with grief and personal loss through digital platforms?
It's a great question. It's an important question for any sort of digital platform. The way we have set the system up is that we do not keep or hold any information within the app. So it is literally impossible to hack our app, so to speak, to gather information. All of the, when we talk about sharing leads and things like that, that's all done immediately. That's kind of sent in an email or an instant connection with the cemetery, and it's handed off to them and their processes at that point, as well as any sort of personal grief information. It's something that if they choose to share it on social media, the person has the full power to do that, but then it's not saved within the app. So that's one way uh, that we wanted to make sure that it was always something that it would never reflect badly on the cemetery or healing path by losing data or being hacked in that way. And it's just simply impossible.
I've always appreciated with you and Dr. Lynn Gibson that you're forecasting and looking ahead to the future and predicting trends far beyond what maybe other professionals are thinking in our business. And I want to know from you, what trends do you see emerging and how people approach death, memorialization, and remembrance?
Yeah, I think, wow, we could we could talk for a whole hour just about that, couldn't we? And I know that you've done a lot of work in this area as well. I think if I was to highlight like two key things, I think back to what I mentioned before, the emphasis on private and personal rituals. As we have a lot of folks who are either moving away from faith traditions or maybe not adhering as closely as they used to, they're coming up with their own unique spin on things and things that feel meaningful to them. So
Mhm.
anybody who can kind of embrace that and help those people feel valued, give them ideas that resonate with them. All those I think are going to be big wins within the cemetery world, among a lot of other things, but let's just go with those for right now.
What advice would you give cemetery operators who want to better serve their communities, but they're not quite sure where to start?
Um, I think probably the most important thing that cemeteries can do is I think getting back to making this a very human exchange, putting themselves and their staff kind of front and center and having a long-term perspective. I think, and also remembering that we cannot rely on families to understand the why of cemeteries anymore. I think yeah, for decades, for generations, we were able to basically assume that, and probably as recently as 30, 40 years ago, basically cemeteries had to be better than their competitor. There was no question of, do I use a cemetery or not? It was, which one do I use? And that's a very different in terms of marketing and how you do outreach. Those are very different questions. And so recognizing that that shift has already happened, um, I think, and certainly leveraging technology where you can, but leveraging technology back to what you mentioned with the eye towards kind of increasing the human connection and creating these relationships. So different ways that you can do that. I think those are going to be the cemeteries that come out on top.
It's exciting to think about the possibilities ahead. And as we get close to wrapping up, I want to touch upon something that is particularly meaningful and timely for both of us. November is National Hospice and Palliative Care Month, which reminds us that the grief journey often begins long before the death occurs. And it brings me to an important question about collaboration across the continuum of care. What opportunities do you see for funeral homes and cemeteries to partner with their local hospice organizations to provide comprehensive support for families throughout the entire end of life journey?
That's a great question. And I think, talking about the healing path, like I mentioned before, we've got hospice groups and individual therapists coming out to the healing path all the time. And so that is an example of those organizations are hungry for resources and are willing to kind of work with folks who can kind of connect with their families. They feel ownership over their families, just like funeral and cemetery professionals feel ownership about the families they serve. And they want to do right by them and provide them with great resources. So if you can help them do that, there are opportunities for collaboration, and also helping them kind of take care of themselves. Just last month I was at a, at a, I was doing a presentation for a funeral home, and we, inviting hospice clergy and local mental health professionals together at the same tables and talking about these. And basically, I get at them in a room and I basically say, look, you're you're all at a high risk for burnout. So let's talk about that. And let's talk about all of us would benefit from better end of life conversations, more honest and open communications, and a reduction in the myths about all the things that all of us do. So let's talk about ways that we can do that all together. So if you can create opportunities to do that in one way or another, they'll respond, it'll build relationships. You'll have, at the end of the day, you'll have people passing back business cards and those sorts of things. And I know you know a whole lot more about that than I do. So yeah, but I think that's the way we're going.
Thank you. And I want to check in with Maddie to see if any questions have come through on the chat box.
Absolutely. Yes, we do have a few questions. So someone asks, can this app connect to our computer system? We are highly run by a computer that is complex, and having a connection between the app and our system would give us better tracking.
That's a great question. There are certain aspects of the app that can be connected to the system. We do have on the app, we do have a find a grave button. And so that it's designed to kind of go, be able to connect into your system. And so we would have the opportunity, if you've got mapping done of various sorts of ways, a searchable database, we would likely be able to connect with that sort of system. We also have and all of these are options. We also have the option, like buy flowers. If you've got a flower buying system with it, within your website or those sorts of things, we would be able to kind of connect directly with that. And like I mentioned before, in a lot of cases, we'd be able to connect with your pre-planning information. Now, I'm going to be really careful when I say connect. I don't want to overpromise something here. We are talking about we're probably not talking about sharing databases back and forth, because then, we go back on, we'd be worried about, can our system be hacked and then somebody get access to all of your information? But more of a one-way, starting with the app and getting to your systems, we can absolutely do that. Great question.
Awesome. And then another question came through. Are cemetery operators able to add available grief activities in the app? Is there the ability to tailor the activities across market segments with our families?
Yeah, we do have the opportunity. We kind of our more advanced plan, we do have the option for almost complete customization. And so our tech guy is very strong at building and creating new and innovative options, and he can pretty much do almost anything that people can kind of, if you've got a mind and kind of draw it out, we can kind of create it. I think, as evidenced by having the 9 very different rituals already built into the app already. So there is an opportunity for that. There's also an opportunity for, might be large enough that you have your own grief support people. So you want to focus on your people instead of me giving the grief support information. We're able to do that as well. Those sorts of things. So depending on how they're talking about doing it, I believe the answer is yeah.
Awesome. And that is what we have for you in terms of the Q&A area. Thank you so
Great.
much.
Thanks,
Great.
Maddie. Dr. Troyer, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. The Healing Path Cemetery System represents a powerful vision for how cemeteries can serve as a true community healing destination where they can be places where grief is honored and connection is fostered and healing is supported through thoughtful integration of tradition and innovation. It was great to learn more about what you have co-founded with Dr. Lynn Gibson. And for our listeners who want to get in touch with you and learn more about the Healing Path system, how can they connect with you?
Yeah, they can connect. First, they can kind of check out things and look in more detail. Healingpathcemetery.com. They can kind of see a wide variety of different things. They can download a demo of the app and just try it themselves. And they can also, a couple of different ways to contact me. In a couple of weeks, they can talk with me in person in Chicago. And I will be at the NFDA convention at booth 1111. I love that number for remembering 1111. And so they can stop by and chat with me. And I'd be happy to answer any questions there in Chicago.
In addition to exhibiting at NFDA convention in Chicago, I know that you have some very exciting news to share.
Yes, we were really honored to be named as one of the 3 finalists for the Innovation Award, and so we're really excited about the opportunity and just really thrilled just to be nominated in that process and recognized as one of the new innovative products of the year. So we're new, but we're really excited about the start that we've got so far.
Congratulations. And speaking of opportunities to learn more, I'm excited to share that Dr. Troyer, Dr. Lynn Gibson, and myself will all be speaking at the ICCFA Leadership Conference on Wednesday, October the 22nd in Maryville, Tennessee. And it's about reimagining funeral service and cemetery engagement. If you are attending the conference, please stop by and say hello. We'd love to connect with you in person and continue this important conversation. And I want to leave everybody with a quote from someone who would definitely approve of the Healing Path system, Dr. Troyer, and that is Dolly Parton. And Dolly said in an interview in 1984, she said, "I love cemeteries because when I was growing up, people always took care of the graves. It was like a golf course. It was very peaceful. It was a quiet place to go where nobody but weirdos like me wanted to hang out with the dead, and the dead don't scare me. It's the living that got me frightened." And I think she would approve of and appreciate what you're incorporating into cemeteries for people to really find peace and comfort in the beauty and the serenity that it brings. Join us next month on November the 12th at 2 p.m., where we will be joined by Taylor Clifford, Program Manager of Client Engagement for J3 Tech Solutions, talking about strategic futuristic planning. Thank you, Dr. Jason Troyer.